Is Ecuador collapsing? The answer lies at the heart of this intricate political landscape and the struggling Ecuadorian economy. Join us as we delve into the details of what happened to Ecuador and unpack the tragedies of Ecuadorian politics. Imagine a nation in turmoil, its political realm shaken by an unthinkable tragedy. The victim? Fernando Villavicencio, an anti-corruption advocate and a presidential candidate. His life was cut short by a tragic assassination while on the campaign trail. This audacious act of political violence thrust Ecuador into an unrelenting state of emergency. A nation once known for its peace now grapples with an alarming surge in crime rates. The past 2 years have witnessed an alarming doubling of the murder count as violent cartels vie for supremacy in the lucrative drug trade. Before we dive into the current state of the country, let's look at some context. Located between Peru and Colombia, Ecuador used to be known as the Island of Peace, in a region marked by conflicts and instability. In 2015, the murder rate stood at a mere 6 per 100,000 people, slightly lower than that of the United States. Former President Rafael Correa's tenure from 2007 aimed to eliminate organized crime by addressing its roots. His focus on poverty reduction aimed to stem the tide of recruits joining the drug cartel's ranks. The police received increased resources to combat criminal groups. Correa even offered amnesty to gangs seeking to leave the criminal life. Correa's efforts were admirable, but still they had unintended repercussions. What were they? His decision to sever ties with the American Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and close a U.S. military base left surveillance gaps. Similarly, the privatization of ports and airports weakened coastal and border security, facilitating drug trafficking. By the time Correa left office in 2017, the situation was already deteriorating. The turning point was the historic peace agreement in Colombia between the government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, a long-standing insurgent group. How did this peace agreement lead to increased violence? FARC had a strong presence in the south of Ecuador, near the Colombian border. They controlled smuggling routes, which helped maintain a relatively peaceful situation. However, their dissolution triggered a scramble for power, as other criminal groups capitalized on the vacuum. Cocaine production surged, intensifying the struggle for control over Ecuador's strategic route to the sea. Following Correa, President Lenin Moreno took charge but struggled to handle the influx of drugs and violence. He allowed the establishment of a U.S. military base on the Galapagos Islands, but this proved insufficient to address the mounting problems. However, one of the most significant and often overlooked issues was corruption. Throughout President Moreno's time in office, corrupt individuals and cunning opportunists took advantage of the government's instability. The rise of drug cartels added fuel to the fire, bringing with them a wave of bribes and illegal activities. Even Moreno himself faced investigation on bribery charges linked to a hydroelectric plant's questionable construction. You might be wondering, why were these drug cartels so interested in Ecuador? The answer lay in Ecuador's strategic location, a shortcut to the sea for Colombian cocaine producers. The process was alarmingly simple. Rainforest cocaine found its way to Ecuador, aided by prison gangs like Los Lobos. Lax airport and port security facilitated their operations. Amidst all of this, chaos began within Ecuador's overcrowded prisons, which became even more packed due to the surge in drug trafficker and gang member arrests. However, this wasn't a result of better policing. It stemmed from increased violence and street disorder. Thousands of dangerous gang members were crammed into already crowded cells with minimal supervision. Predictably, this combination proved disastrous. Ironically, gang members were in complete control of the prisons, even possessing the keys to the cells. This gave them the freedom to introduce explosives and heavy weaponry, turning prisons into battlefields. Riots became commonplace, leading to hundreds of inmate deaths in brutal gang wars. In 2021 alone, over 500 inmates were killed, and many more escaped custody in the midst of this mayhem. But at least this gang warfare was now limited to prisons, right? Wrong. The prison chaos soon spilled into the streets. Gang wars over smuggling routes triggered daily bombings, assassinations, and terror. The COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing economic crisis exacerbated the situation. Millions lost their jobs and faced severe poverty, making them vulnerable targets for recruitment by the cartels. The murder rate soared from 6 to 16 per 100,000 as the government struggled to reclaim order. In 2021, President Lasso took office. His term was scarred scarred by corruption allegations, including the bizarre discovery of cocaine on an Air Force base. Radar equipment essential for detecting trafficker boats was sabotaged from within. Even the Navy and the Army found themselves entangled in scandals involving collusion with drug traffickers. Efforts to combat corruption failed, and discontent escalated into protests, leading to Lasso's impeachment just 2 years into his presidency. With the background and context out of the way, this brings us to the present day. Corruption's grip on Ecuador seems widespread and stronger than ever. The country grapples with significant challenges, including the presence of powerful cartels, an overwhelmed prison system, and a government struggling to regain control. Corruption has permeated various institutions, from the Air Force to the Navy, and beyond. The erosion of security and the rise of crime have left Ecuadorians seeking solutions for these pressing issues. Amid the darkness, Fernando Villavicencio emerged as a beacon of honesty. His journey began as an investigative journalist, uncovering corruption wherever it lay. He even played a role in revealing details about Julian Assange's time at the Ecuadorian embassy. However, his boldness led to exile after facing false charges during the previous administration's reign. Fernando's return in 2018 marked a turning point. With Correa out of power, he campaigned under the banner of law and order, vowing to cleanse the nation of criminal influence. He made significant strides, securing a seat at the National Assembly and continuing his fight for justice. As his campaign gained momentum, threats grew. In September 2022, he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt when his home was attacked. The courageous journalist turned politician posed a real challenge to the cartels and prison gangs. This was precisely why he was assassinated on August 9, 2023, after being shot in the head. A video emerged after his death showing a masked gunman taking credit for the crime on behalf of the prison gang Los Lobos. However, some members of Los Lobos denied involvement, claiming they were framed. The true perpetrators remain uncertain, leaving a haunting mystery. With Fernando looking like Ecuador's last hope, what should the country do now after his death? To gain insight into potential solutions, we can look to El Salvador, a country that tackled gangs with a firm hand. In response to a surge in crime, El Salvador launched a war on gangs in 2022. Within just 16 months, they imprisoned over 70,000 individuals on gang-related charges. The streets are safer, and public approval of the president soared. However, this approach came at a cost. The Salvadoran government's criteria for arresting citizens on suspicion of gang activity became ambiguous. Rights groups voiced concerns over human rights violations, and over 65,000 arrests within a year. The pursuit of safety led to a loss of individual freedom, prompting reflection on the balance between security and civil liberties. Could a similar strategy work in Ecuador? The prospect of cracking down on gangs has undeniable appeal to many Ecuadorians who are tired of living in fear. Fernando Villavicencio's campaign, driven by his anti-corruption stance, garnered significant support. However, with his tragic passing, the race shifted. Leading the race are candidates Luisa Gutierrez and Jacob Perez, though their campaigns have not centered on crime. Emerging as a potential candidate is Jan Topic, whose authoritarian approach to security draws comparisons to El Salvador's president. A new presidency in Ecuador could reverberate globally, particularly in the realm of the Colombian drug trade. The previous administration's foreign policy decisions strained relations with the U.S., allowing other powers like China and Russia to gain influence in the region. As Ecuador's foreign policy aligns with that of its past, the U.S.'s role in Central and South America faces challenges. The geopolitical shifts impact the region's security, with Central and South American politicians leaning left and forging ties with countries like China and Russia. The U.S.'s position weakens. The path ahead for Ecuador is treacherous. Corruption threatens to plunge it into chaos, while foreign powers await to exploit its vulnerabilities. As the world watches, Ecuador faces its reckoning. Its journey towards stability and prosperity remains uncertain as events unfold with global consequences. If you are eager to explore how El Salvador tackled a similar crisis and what potential solutions could salvage Ecuador's future, click the video on screen now to discover more.